Hello and welcome to a millinery hat making video. My name is Ilona, I am a milliner based in London, and today I'm going to show you how I made my entry to the Feltmakers Design Competition. This is a European hat competition open to students on millinery courses or those who have completed their studies in the past year. I finished the City and Guilds Level 2 course, which I passed with distinction last year in September 2021, so I comply with all the entry requirements. The brief was very brief indeed to design a lady's hat. The hat must be made out of felt and fit an average head size of 57 centimeters. Whilst the award is for design, the hat itself must be capable of being manufactured in a workroom. In addition to the hat, I need to submit a backing paper outlining my thought process, inspiration, and instructions to remake the hat. Oh, and also an artwork of the design. In this video, I'll take you through all of what I have just mentioned. So, let's get our sketchbooks out and get started. As part of my backing paper for the competition, I have produced a mini digital sketchbook which you can see by following the link in the description box. Let me take you through my thought process. I am a member of the Women's Institute and we are currently running a campaign called End Plastic Soup. This campaign is about exploring the extent of microplastic pollution in our waterways that originate from synthetic fibres when they are washed. I feel that I can do my bit for the campaign by not adding to the microplastics in water. I tried to use sustainable, natural, eco-friendly and biodegradable materials across my work where possible. In this project, I have used wool felt, cotton-covered millinery wire and 100% cotton petersham ribbon, natural mother-of-pearl chip beads, a mixture of vintage and cotton thread. As usual, for a more comprehensive list of tools and materials, have a look at the description box. To make my design on trend, I started off by looking at the Pantone colour of the year 2022, Very Perry. The closest felt hood I could find to Very Perry was a deep blue leaning purple. I considered dyeing a felt hood to a light periwinkle colour, however I decided that this would prolong hat production in a workroom. Moreover, it would be easier to reproduce this hat for commercial purposes from ready-dyed materials. Thinking about the creatures that inhabit the seas brought my mind to octopuses. They are fabulous beings, intelligent and colourful. I had the perfect hat block in mind. With its curves, it reminded me of octopus tentacles. I didn't just want to block a single shape, however, as on its own I thought it looked a little bit too boring. Instead, I planned to make two shapes, wire them, and started playing with how I could combine them into one. Let me show you how I did that before we move on to the decoration. I had already stiffened my wool felt hood, and if you'd like to see a video on how to do that, I've linked to it in the top right. I am blocking on the FB77 hat block from Guy Morse Brown. It is quite small and the curves make it difficult to pull the felt tightly over the top without it shifting all over the place. Eventually, I smoothed it out and pinned it down. You may notice that I'm not blocking the top of the felt hood, but the side. This is because I want there to be enough felt left over to block a second shape. Once everything was pinned down, I brushed the felt with a soft bristle brush. Now, this step is very important. Make sure your kitten knows how much she's loved and give her a cuddle. When the shape was dry, I took it off the block and immediately got to wiring it. As this block shape has so many different curves, it is very important to completely straighten the wire before shaping. I formed the straightened wire around the block and made sure it fit inside the felt hat. I then joined it with a 5 cm overlap. I have a video on how to do that, which I've linked to in the top right. As I am working with vintage and cotton thread throughout this project, I wanted to wax it to make sure it wouldn't snap. I always wax thread when working with felt, as the friction of pulling thread through so many fibres weakens it. The waxed thread is protected, so it is less likely to snap. To wax the thread, I cut several lengths off the spool. They are about the length of my arm. Then, I hold each strand in the middle, drag one end through the block of beeswax 5 times, then repeat on the other half of the thread. Once all the threads are coated, I put them in between paper and drag them under a hot iron. Now I am ready to sew the wire into the felt hat. I'm using invisible stitches to make sure no marks are left on the outside of the felt. And once I did all this, I did it all again from the beginning, so that I had two shapes to work with. I played around with positioning them on Anne, my poupée head, and once I was satisfied with a good position, it was time to decorate. I'm using natural mother-of-pearl chip beads. Oysters and mussels are another aspect of sea life, and I thought the beads paired perfectly with the deep purple colour of the felt hood. I am using beads in multiple sizes and scattering them down the curve of the hat, concentrating the larger ones above the left eyebrow. I am positioning them in place temporarily with some pins. This allows me to play with the placement and get each bead just right. Instead of beads, my first thought was to use felt discs adorned with mother-of-pearl buttons. This would recreate the look of octopuses' circular suckers on their tentacles. But after creating a sample, I decided that it would be too literal an interpretation and not very elegant on this hat shape. Do you think the hat would have looked better with the pearl buttons rather than the beads? I'd love to know your opinion. Let me know in the comments. And while you're leaving me a comment, please consider liking and subscribing. This really helps me grow and reach a larger audience. Once I was happy with the bead positions, I stitched them down using waxed cotton thread. I hid all my stitches inside the felt. This beading technique accentuates one of my favourite properties of felt as a material, and I wanted to leave the hat unlined to show that the stitches are completely hidden. I also managed to hide my start and end knots under the beads and used a dab of glue under those beads for extra security. It's now time to stitch the two hat shapes together, and again I'm using invisible stitches and waxed thread. Then it was time for something very nerve-wracking. If this next step went wrong, I'd have to block and wire another shape and start almost from the beginning. I didn't like how the undershape stuck out at the back, so to neaten it off, I just cut that bit off. I then had to cut into the wire and reshape it to fit the new back. I think that went surprisingly well. I don't know about you, but I really don't like cutting into materials for fear of it going wrong. But this turned out well, so let's carry on. I stitched the new bit of wire in place and turned my attention to the gap at the back of the hat. I used the cut-off bit of felt to plug it closed. Once again, I stitched it to the other parts of the hat using invisible stitches and added a new bit of wire for stability. This extra bit of felt had the added benefit of turning the hat into a more vintage style, which I think is always a plus. And here's almost the last step, covering the joins of the felt. I'm using 100% cotton petersham ribbon, as the natural fibres are what allows the ribbon to bend and curve with the help of an iron. I'm going to need to cover 3 joins and also the outside edge of the hat. The petersham over the small join can be sewn down straight away. Next, I'm going to curve 2 lengths of ribbon into S curves. This is for the remaining 2 joints. I'm going to pin them in place and stitch them down. I'm stitching all the ribbons along both edges to make sure they completely hide the joins. Where the hat tentacle comes to a point, I am hiding the end of one ribbon under the folded end of the other ribbon. This is much easier than trying to fit a single ribbon around the edge of such a steep curve. As for the outer edges, I shaped that ribbon into a C curve. I am stitching it down in exactly the same way, but this time I am hiding the ends in between 2 felt-shaped joins. And the last step is to add a fastening. I have chosen to use a couple of metal combs. I wanted to avoid using materials that would not be sustainable, so I couldn't use elastic or a plastic comb. Or indeed my favourite crisp veiling ribbon, which I use in almost every hat I make. I only recently figured out that the crisp veiling ribbon wasn't cotton, as I had thought it was, so I am looking for alternatives. If you know of anything that looks like this but is cotton, let me know in the comments. The metal hair combs themselves are actually pretty good. I have positioned them at the back of the hat so that they counterbalance the shape and push it forward on the wearer's head. The hat itself has a lot of wire running through it, so in addition to the comb, it can be bent to fit the wearer's head. And here's the finished hat. I think it definitely has an out-of-the-sea vibe to it. I like to think of it as if an octopus has wrapped itself around the wearer's head, just like in the Bond film Octopussy, but less deadly and perhaps more elegant. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. This really helps me grow and reach a larger audience. If you'd like to support my videos, you can do so via Patreon or leave me a tip. All the links are in the description box. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you've learnt something new. See you next time. Bye.